Don't move. Stay exactly where you are.
Don't move. Stay exactly where you are. Seo Jun thought he was walking into a trap set by his rivals, until the woman in the white blazer turned around. It was supposed to be a simple hit, a final cleansing of the syndicate's blood debts. But the moment he saw Amanda's face, the ruthless Mafia boss who never flinched at a blade felt his heart stop. 5 years of burying her memory vanished in a single breath. And suddenly, the most dangerous man in Seoul was the only one in the room who forgot how to breathe. The floor-to-ceiling glass of the VIP penthouse acted as a silent witness to the glittering chaos of the Seoul skyline below, a neon jungle that Seo Jun usually ruled with an iron fist. Inside, the air was thick, tasting of expensive scotch and the metallic tang of a weapon recently drawn. Amanda adjusted the sleeve of her ivory blazer, her expression a mask of corporate marble that gave away nothing. Her dark curls caught the dim amber glow of the office lamps as she set her designer bag on the table, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the silence. She had spent 3 years reinventing herself as the industry's most feared fixer, scrubbing the scent of gunpowder from her skin. She was halfway through a high-stakes digital file when the heavy oak doors kicked open, and the atmosphere in the room didn't just shift, it shattered. Seo Jun's hand hovered over the concealed holster at his hip, his knuckles white against the deep crimson of his silk shirt. This was room 404, the room where a traitor was supposed to be begging for mercy. Instead, the heavy scent of vanilla and expensive oud struck him like a physical blow, a fragrance that belonged to a ghost. "You're late, Seo Jun," Amanda said, her voice a cool blade that cut through the humming silence of the penthouse. She didn't look up from the leather armchair. She was a vision of clinical, ivory perfection, her white blazer a stark contrast to the dark, predatory energy he brought into the room. When she finally turned, her dark eyes were void of the warmth he had spent 5 years trying to forget. The sight of her, composed, powerful, and utterly indifferent, did what no rival syndicate ever could. It made him stumble. "Amanda?" His voice was a raw fracture of its usual command. "I buried you. I sent you to the States with enough money to never look back. Why are you in this room?" "I'm not here as your ex-wife, and I'm certainly not here to reminisce," she replied, standing slowly. She moved with a predatory grace that was new, a confidence forged in boardrooms rather than back alleys. She slid a sleek, black tablet across the mahogany desk toward him. "I'm here as the lead consultant for the Hanjail Group. Your war with them ends tonight, or I dismantle your offshore holdings before the sun rises." Seo Jun ignored the tablet, his gaze locked on the pulse point at her neck. He was a man of violence, a king of a shadowed empire, yet he felt stripped bare under her gaze. The shock was receding, replaced by a volatile mix of fury and an ache he refused to name. He stepped into her personal space, the heat from his red shirt nearly brushing her white lapels, but she didn't flinch. "You're working for the people who tried to put a bullet in my head last week," he hissed, his shadow looming over her. "I'm working for the people who want to survive you," Amanda countered, her chin tilting upward. "And right now, Seo Jun, you're making it very easy for them. You're walking into a slaughterhouse thinking it's a throne room. I was sent here to fix your mess because, apparently, you've become sloppy in my absence." The disrespect would have cost anyone else their life, but Seo Jun only felt the frantic thrum of his own heart. He had entered the room looking for a victim. He had found the only person capable of bringing him to his knees. The silence that followed her declaration was more deafening than the gunfire Seo Jun had expected. He stood in the center of the opulent suite, a splash of violent crimson against the muted grays of the penthouse, his chest heaving as if he'd just run a mile through the Seoul rain. 5 years of curated coldness, of iron-fisted rule and calculated cruelty, had evaporated in the span of a heartbeat. Amanda didn't move. She remained a pillar of composure, her dark fingers resting lightly on the edge of the mahogany desk. The pristine white of her blazer seemed to repel the shadows of the room, an armor of professional detachment that made Seo Jun feel like a ghost haunting his own life. To the world, he was the predator, the man who held the city's jugular in his hand. But in the reflection of the floor-to-ceiling windows, he saw the truth. He was the one unraveling, his red shirt rumpled, his dark hair falling over eyes that were wide with a frantic, uncharacteristic vulnerability. 5 years, Amanda, he finally rasped, his voice scraping against the quiet. Not a word, not a trace. I spent millions making sure you were ghosted into a life of safety, far away from the blood on these floors. And you walked back into the mouth of the beast wearing a corporate badge. Safety was your choice, June, not mine, she said, her voice steady, though a flicker of something, regret or perhaps just fatigue, traversed her features before being tucked away. She stepped around the desk, the soft click of her heels marking the rhythm of her dominance. You treated our marriage like a tactical retreat. You traded me for your empire, and now that empire is crumbling because you can't see the knife at your own back. She stopped just inches from him. The scent of her was a memory he hadn't realized was still a wound, clean, sharp, and hauntingly familiar. Co. June reached out, his hand trembling slightly, wanting to touch the fabric of her sleeve just to ensure she wasn't a hallucination conjured by the scotch and the stress. But he stopped himself. The power struggle was no longer about territory or blood debts. It was about who would break first under the weight of the silence they had shared since the divorce. He looked down at her, the chaotic energy of his syndicates were clashing with the icy calm of her resolve. He was the storm, but she was the horizon, immovable and indifferent to his rage. You think you can just fix this? He whispered, his eyes narrowing as he tried to reclaim the mask of the boss. You think you can walk back into my world and tell me how to bleed? I'm the only reason you aren't bleeding out on that carpet right now, she countered, her gaze never wavering. The silk of Co. June's shirt felt like a leaden weight against his skin, the deep red hue a mocking mirror of the night their world had fractured. 5 years ago, that same color had stained the ivory rug of their penthouse, not from wine, but from the shoulder wound Co. June had tried to hide as he slammed the divorce papers onto the table. That night, he had been a man possessed by a desperate, violent love, screaming at Amanda to sign, to leave, to run before his enemies turned her into a target. He had traded her heart for her life, watching her walk out the door in a tattered silk robe, her face a mask of shattered betrayal. Now, the woman standing before him in the sterile, high-end VIP lounge was a stranger forged in the fires of that abandonment. The crisp, structured lines of her white blazer were a literal and figurative suit of armor. While Co. June remained trapped in the visceral, bloody chaos of his syndicate, symbolized by the restless, raw energy of his crimson attire, Amanda had ascended into a world of cold logic and calculated leverage. You're looking at the shirt, June, Amanda said, her voice pulling him back from the ghost of that rainy midnight. Her eyes flicked to the fabric over his heart. Red was always your color. It hides the blood, but it screams the intent. You're still the man who thinks every problem can be solved with a surge of adrenaline and a loaded clip. And you're the woman who thinks a contract can replace a soul, he countered, the bitterness of half a decade thickening his tongue. He paced the small perimeter between them, his movements jagged and erratic compared to her stillness. You used to wear soft things, Amanda. You used to believe in things that weren't written in fine print. Soft things get torn apart in your world, she replied, her tone devoid of the tears she had shed 5 years prior. She adjusted her lapel, the movement sharp and professional. I traded soft for stratagem. While you were busy playing King of the Ashes, I was learning how to own the wind. My role tonight isn't to mourn what we were. It's to ensure the Hanjiol group doesn't have to erase you from the board to protect their interests. The power dynamic had shifted completely. In their marriage, he had been the sun and she the moon, reflecting his volatile light. But here, in the dim glow of the penthouse, she was the steady North Star, and he was a satellite losing its orbit. The white of her blazer felt blinding, a reminder that she had cleaned her hands of his sins, while he was still drowning in the red. Amanda didn't wait for his pride to catch up with his shock. She reached into her leather bag, the metallic click of the clasp echoing like a hammer falling on an empty chamber. She pulled out a translucent data drive, its blue light pulsing like a steady heartbeat against the stark white of her sleeve. You think the Hanjiol group is your enemy tonight, June? You're looking in the wrong direction, she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous frequency. She stepped toward the mahogany desk and tapped the drive. A holographic display shimmered into the air between them. casting a ghostly glow over the deep red of his shirt. Seo Jun's eyes narrowed as he looked at the scrolling lines of encrypted ledgers and recorded intercepts. His breath hitched. It wasn't corporate jargon. It was internal syndicate communication. "This is my private server," he rasped, his hand finally dropping from his holster as the weight of the betrayal began to sink in. "How did you get this?" "I'm a fixer, remember? I don't just bridge gaps. I find the leaks before they drown my clients," Amanda replied, her gaze steady as she pointed to a specific string of authorizations. "These aren't Hanjail signatures. These are your own logistics codes, authorizing a hit on the rival chairman's son, a hit you never ordered. Someone in your inner circle wanted a war, June. They wanted you to trigger a blood feud so massive that your board of directors would have no choice but to retire you for the sake of stability." The room seemed to shrink. Seo Jun leaned over the desk, his shadow cutting through the blue light of the evidence. He recognized the digital footprint. It was a sequence only his most trusted lieutenants could access. The realization was a cold blade to the ribs. He had spent 5 years building a fortress to keep the world out, only to realize the rot was already inside the walls. "They're using you as the fall guy," Amanda continued, her tone softening just enough to let the old intimacy bleed through the professional veneer. "By the time you finished settling the debt in this room, your own men would have leaked the footage to the authorities and the rival families. You weren't coming here to be a king, June. You were coming here to be a martyr for someone else's coup." Seo Jun looked up from the data, his dark hair shadowing his eyes. The rage was there, but beneath it was a flicker of the man she used to know, the one who realized he had finally met a problem he couldn't shoot his way out of. "And why tell me?" he asked, his voice a low vibration. "You could have let them take me out. It would have been cleaner for your clients." Amanda closed the file, the blue light vanishing, leaving them in the dim, amber warmth of the penthouse. "Because," she said, her white blazer glowing in the dark, "I don't like messy endings. And I don't let anyone destroy what's mine, even if mine is just a memory." The intimate tension between them shattered as a muffled thud vibrated through the heavy oak doors, followed by the distinctive, metallic clack-clack of suppressed gunfire. The golden light of the penthouse suddenly felt like a spotlight on a kill zone. "Get down." Seo Jun's voice lost its fractured edge, replaced by the guttural command of a man born for combat. Before Amanda could even process the shift, he lunged across the mahogany desk, his powerful frame a blur of crimson as he tackled her to the floor. They hit the plush carpet just as a volley of rounds shredded the upholstery of the chairs they had occupied seconds ago. Shards of expensive wood and white feathers from the cushions rained down on them like macabre snow. Seo Jun was a heavy, protective weight over her, his hand instinctively cradling the back of her head, shielding her from the flying debris. His red shirt, once a symbol of his emotional turmoil, now looked like a splash of fresh blood against the ivory of her blazer. "It's not a coup anymore," he hissed into her ear, his breath hot and ragged. "It's a cleanup." The service elevator. Amanda gasped, her voice tight, but remarkably controlled despite the chaos. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. Her fingers dug into the silk of his shoulder, pulling him toward the reality of the floor plan. "The main hallway is a kill box. If they're using the logistics codes I found, they've already jammed the primary lifts. There's a freight bypass behind the bar, coded to the hotel's kitchen staff, not the syndicate." Seo Jun pulled his weapon, a matte black handgun that looked like an extension of his own arm. He peered over the edge of the desk, firing 3 calculated shots that sparked against the doorway, forcing the shadows in the hall to retreat. "You're sure?" he asked, glancing down at her. "I memorized the blueprints before I walked in here, June. I don't go anywhere without an exit strategy," she retorted, her dark eyes flashing with a cold brilliance. "Move. Now." They moved as a single, disjointed entity, Seo Jun providing the lethal cover, his body constantly positioned between Amanda and the door, while she stayed low, her white blazer a moving target he was determined to keep pristine. As another burst of gunfire shattered the floor-to-ceiling windows, spraying the room with diamonds of broken glass, Seo Jun realized the roles had reversed. He was the sword, blunt and fierce, but she was the hand guiding him through the dark. They reached the hidden panel behind the mahogany bar just as the doors kicked open completely. Seo Jun emptied his magazine into the hallway to buy them a heartbeat of time. Go, he roared, shoving her into the cramped, utilitarian darkness of the freight lift. As the metal gates hissed shut, the neon lights of Seoul blurred into a streak of frantic color, leaving them trapped in the narrow silence of the descent. The freight elevator groaned to a halt in a basement garage filled with the scent of damp concrete and exhaust. Without a word, Seo Jun steered Amanda toward a nondescript black sedan stashed in a darkened corner. The drive to the safe house, a minimalist concrete bunker hidden beneath an old textile warehouse, was a blur of high-speed turns and suffocating silence. Once inside, the heavy steel door hissed shut, sealing them in a space that felt too small for their shared history. The air was cool, but the tension between them was a physical heat. Seo Jun stripped off his ruined red shirt, tossing it onto a chair, his bare chest map-marked with scars Amanda didn't recognize. He began cleaning a fresh graze on his forearm, his movements jagged and angry. "You shouldn't have been there, Amanda," he growled, not looking at her. "The moment you stepped into that room, you became a ghost again." "I was never a ghost, June. I was a casualty," she snapped, her composure finally fraying. She stood in the center of the room, her white blazer stained with soot and glass dust, looking like a fallen angel in a tomb. "You threw me away. You handed me those papers and told me I was a liability. Do you have any idea what it's like to realize the person you love thinks you're a weakness?" Seo Jun spun around, the antiseptic bottle clattering onto the table. "I did it to save you. There was a letter, Amanda, an anonymous threat with photos of you at the gallery, a sniper's reticle over your heart. It said if I didn't cut you loose, they'd send you back to me in a box. I had no choice." Amanda froze, her breath hitching. "A letter? June, I never saw a threat. But I received a letter too. It was signed by you. It said you'd found someone else, someone who understood the blood better than I ever could. It said you were bored of playing house with a civilian." The silence that followed was visceral. Seo Jun's eyes widened, his anger replaced by a haunting realization. "I never wrote that. I would never. I spent 5 years hating myself for breaking your heart to keep you alive, and you spent 5 years believing I replaced you." The space between them vanished. The truth they had built their separate lives upon was a lie constructed by the same architect now trying to kill them. The betrayal wasn't just in the syndicate. It had started in their bedroom half a decade ago. "The mole," Amanda whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. "They didn't just want your chair, June. They wanted to make sure you had nothing left to live for." The cold realization settled over the safe house like a winter frost. Seo Jun stood motionless, his shadow stretched long and jagged against the concrete wall by the dim, flickering overhead light. The revelation of the forged letters, the surgical precision with which their lives had been dismantled, pointed to only one person. There was only one man who had possessed the intimacy to ghostwrite Seo Jun's heartbreak and the clearance to intercept a syndicate-level threat. "It was never a rival family," Seo Jun whispered, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over pavement. He turned toward the workbench, his fingers flying across a secondary encrypted terminal. "The logistics codes, the timing of the hit, the letters, there's only one shadow that follows me that closely." Amanda stepped closer, her white blazer reflecting the blue glow of the scrolling data. "Minho," she breathed. The name felt like a curse in the small room. Minho had been Seo Jun's right hand since they were teenagers in the slums of Busan. He was the one who had stood as the witness at their secret wedding. He was the one who had literally held the door open as Amanda walked out of Seo Jun's life 5 years ago, offering a sympathetic, treacherous nod. "He didn't just want the throne," Seo Jun said, his jaw tightening until the muscle pulsed. "He wanted to hollow me out first. He knew that as long as I had you, I had a reason to keep the syndicate clean, to eventually get out. By removing you, he ensured I would become the monster the board wanted, someone focused only on expansion and blood." Amanda watched the data stream, her fixer's mind already connecting the final dots. "Look at the offshore routing on the Hanjail contract. Jun Minho isn't just staging a coup. He's already sold your distribution routes to the highest bidder. He's liquidating your empire while he hides behind the chaos he's stirred up between us." Seo Jun slammed his fist onto the table, the vibration rattling the spare magazines and medical supplies. The betrayal was a physical ache, deeper than any bullet wound. For 5 years, he had leaned on the man who had poisoned his well. "He thinks I'm dead in that penthouse," Seo Jun said, his eyes catching a dangerous, predatory light. "He thinks you're just a corporate casualty." "Then let him keep thinking that," Amanda replied, her voice regaining its icy, professional edge. She reached out, her hand hovering just inches from Seo Jun's bare, scarred shoulder. "He's expecting a grieving widower or a corpse. He isn't expecting the two of us together. He built his plan on our silence, June. It's time we finally start talking." The grand ballroom of the Shilla was a sea of velvet masks and whispered treacheries, the air heavy with the scent of lilies and cold ambition. At the center of the room stood Minho, draped in the arrogant confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He was raising a glass of vintage champagne, his face half hidden by a golden lion's mask, accepting the subtle bows of generals who thought they were greeting their new king. Then the heavy gilded doors swung open, and the music faltered. Seo Jun didn't enter like a ghost. He entered like a reckoning. He had traded his blood-stained red shirt for a tailored black tuxedo that fit him like armor, his presence a dark, gravitational pull that silenced the room. Beside him, Amanda was a vision of lethal elegance. Her white blazer had been replaced by a floor-length ivory gown that shimmered like a blade under the crystal chandeliers, her face uncovered and defiant. Minho's glass froze at his lips. The lion's mask couldn't hide the sudden, jagged tremor in his hand. "You look like you've seen a dead man." "Minho," Seo Jun's voice carried across the marble floor, a low, lethal rumble. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need to. The sheer weight of his survival was enough to make the men in the room step back, their loyalties wavering in the sudden shift of the tide. As Seo Jun held the center of the room, Amanda stepped forward, her heels clicking a rhythmic death knell against the floor. She didn't look at the guns twitching under silk jackets. She looked at the tablet in her hand. "The Hanjeol Group has officially rescinded the merger," Amanda announced, her voice echoing with the authority of a woman who had spent 5 years learning to rule the wind. "More importantly, the board has just received the logs of the offshore accounts you opened in the syndicate's name to siphon their assets. By the time I finish this sentence, every credit line associated with your name has been frozen. You aren't a successor, Minho. You're a liability." She tapped the screen, and the massive digital displays lining the ballroom flickered. Instead of the syndicate's crest, they began to scroll through the evidence of Minho's double-dealing. The forged letters, the unauthorized hits, the sale of the Busan routes. Minho lunged, but he was too slow. The generals who had toasted him moments ago were now the ones pinning him against the velvet-covered walls. The power hadn't just shifted, it had been surgically removed. Seo Jun walked slowly toward his former friend, stopping just inches away. He didn't strike him. He simply reached out and plucked the golden mask from Minho's face, revealing the hollow cowardice beneath. Then, he turned his back on the traitor, his gaze finding Amanda across the ruins of the coup. For the first time in 5 years, the red and the white were on the same side. The echoes of Minho being dragged from the hall faded into the heavy velvet curtains, leaving a vacuum of silence that the elite guests were too terrified to fill. Seo Jun stood at the head of the ballroom, the black tuxedo framing his broad shoulders like a shroud for the man he used to be. He looked at the men who had been ready to betray him, his gaze stripping them of their titles until they bowed, one by one, acknowledging the king who had returned from the dead. But Seo Jun didn't look at the throne. He turned his back on the seat of power and walked toward Amanda. She stood by the balcony, the night breeze of Seoul tugging at her ivory gown. The city lights glittered behind her, no longer a neon jungle to be conquered, but a map of possibilities. She had her bag in hand, her posture as straight and unbreakable as the day she'd walked out on him 5 years ago. "The board has accepted the transition to a legitimate holding company," she said, her voice professional, though her eyes betrayed a lingering spark of the fire they'd shared in the safe house. "The blood money has been laundered into infrastructure and tech. You're a businessman now, Seo Jun. My contract is fulfilled." She turned to leave, the click of her heels a final, stinging punctuation. "Amanda, wait." He didn't grab her wrist. He didn't command her to stay. He simply stood in her path, the raw, vulnerable man in the red shirt finally finding his voice within the shell of the boss. I don't want a wife to hide away in a gilded cage, he said, his voice dropping to a low, honest vibration that carried more weight than any syndicate order. And I don't want an employee to fix my mistakes. I've spent 5 years ruling through fear and dying of loneliness. I don't want to rule anymore. I want to build. He reached into his pocket, but he didn't pull out a ring or a weapon. He pulled out a sleek, obsidian keycard, the master access to the new corporate headquarters. He held it out to her, the space between them bridging the gap of 5 years of silence. Stay, he whispered. Not because you need my protection or because I need your silence. Stay as my equal. Let's build an empire that doesn't require us to look over our shoulders. No more lies, no more letters. Just us, and a world that finally knows our names for the right reasons. Amanda looked at the key, then up at the man who had finally learned that strength wasn't found in a fist, but in a partnership. A small, knowing smile broke through her corporate mask, the first real smile he'd seen in half a decade. She reached out, her fingers brushing his as she took the card. I have a lot of conditions, Co. June, she warned, her eyes dancing with the sharp intellect that had saved them both. I wouldn't expect anything less, he replied, and for the first time, the king and his partner walked out of the ballroom together, leaving the shadows behind to face the dawn. I hope you enjoyed this adaptation of the high-stakes reunion narrative. Subscribe to our channel to get more video like this.